Newly obtained internal records reveal how Washington quietly funded and directed a youth mobilization program in Nepal, blending political training, protest strategy, and geopolitical messaging to counter India and China's influence. Internal documents from the International Republican Institute, IRI, which, if you haven't heard of them, this is a U.S. government-funded organization. A U.S. organization funded by the NED. IRI is just an offshoot of NED. Why is NED having to create offshoots? Because people have started to realize that the NED is actually the CIA. The NED is a CIA offshoot. So now it's IRI. It's kind of like Blackwater changed their name to Z, spelled XE. And then because the branding was awful, and then people realized that it was named Z, and then they changed their name to Academy because Z became, people realized what it meant. The internal documents revealed the structure of a $350,000 political program, which, imagine how much $350,000, how far it goes in Nepal. It might not go as far in the United States. $350,000 in Nepal goes pretty goddamn far. Political program in Nepal that trained and mobilized young Nepalese to advocate against the influence of India and China in national policymaking and to push for governance reforms aligned with U.S. priorities. So although they go in there and they say, we're here to help you be bold young leaders and all this crap, at the heart of it, the real reasoning is to get these people to push for anti-China, anti-India policies. And, if we happen to get a coup here or there, well, that's just icing on the cake. The records, contracts, budgets, proposals, research reports, funder updates, and training briefs cover the period from July 2021 to 2022. Oh, that's under Joe Biden. You mean we were doing awful shit under Joe Biden? I thought it was just Donald Trump. And give a granular view of how the externally funded initiative operated. The landing page of the IRI's website makes very clear the purpose of its existence. They didn't even bother to really cover up what their reasoning was. The IRI's website says, around the world, dictators are working together against American interests. What? How dare anyone work against American interests? They are invested in America's failure, but they will not prevail. For more than 40 years, the IRI has helped to make America safer, stronger, and more prosperous by equipping partners with the tools they need to build successful democratic societies. By democratic, we mean America's blood boys. The program, Youth Leadership Transparent Policy, explicitly described its goal as strengthening youth political participation to put pressure on Nepalese political decision makers to become more transparent, accountable, citizen-centered. And look, a lot of these, it's hard to argue with, and I would agree with. Should Nepalese political decision makers be more transparent? Sure. Should they be accountable? Absolutely. Should they be citizen-centered? Sure. Responsive to youth concerns? Absolutely. So let's bring in the U.S. Wait, what was that last part? So let's do what the U.S. says and make sure we sever ties with China. Wait, what just happened? Just in the last little part you said. Well, let's see. I said they should be transparent. Yeah, I agree with that. Accountable, absolutely. We're together on that one. So, citizen-centered, right? There's that. Yep, totally. And responsive to youth concerns. Okay, we're in agreement. And do whatever America says and not anything China wants to have. Wait, what was that last part? You're doing something there at the end. I couldn't work out. You mumbled. I don't know what you're talking about. While training them to advocate on political turmoil, government corruption, and national policy making manipulated by countries like China and India. The plan was to create networks of young activists who would act as advocates for democratic reforms promoted by the U.S. using advocacy programs and protests to press party leaders and government officials. The program proposal places Nepal within a broader pattern of IRI's regional youth mobilization efforts. It draws repeated comparisons to the Emerging Leaders Academy initiatives in Sri Lanka and Indonesia, presenting them as models of how youth networks can be trained to engage elected representatives. Oh, engage? Is that what it is when you're throwing firebombs at the Supreme Court? I guess that's pretty engaging. Wow, you really engaged those officials, didn't you, with your Molotov cocktails? The recent protest in Nepal that led to the overthrow of the government was heavily supported by online manipulations as well. And this is why the government said they were going to shut down social media, because they could see what was going on. And of course, young people, understandably, got furious. Why are you shutting down our social media? Now, what people didn't realize is that social media that they were using was heavily manipulated by the US and Western interests in order to create a false, as they call astroturf, right? A fake grassroots uprising. It was a digitally manipulated movement with 34% of protest-related discourse on social media platforms like X generated by fake, inauthentic profiles. So that's a third of all interactions on this for these protests were fake. They were not, as it says, they were not crude bots, because we're used to the time where it was just bots saying, yeah, uprising, yeah, protest. And you're like, okay, this shit's fake. But they've gotten highly sophisticated, the article says. Highly sophisticated digital personas, many of which used AI-generated visuals of protesters and mimicked authentic Nepali voices by using identical hashtags such as Gen Z protest, Wake Up Nepal, and social media ban. The disinformation campaign reached an estimated 326 million potential views, over 164,000 interactions between fake and real profiles, a disproportionate influence in Nepal's political discourse. So you have mass infiltration of this political discourse online. And hilariously, the US, whenever a government in another country that we're trying to overthrow or cause a coup or whatever, wherever that country says we're going to put restrictions on X, or we're going to put restrictions on this social media platform or that one, the US government, the US media says, oh, censorship, they're censoring it. Meanwhile, in the UK, in the US, in Canada, they're heavily suppressing our speech. They're selling these platforms off to billionaires like Larry Ellison and Elon Musk to be manipulated, to be heavily manipulated. I mean, they were already. And we know that, right? Because we know before Elon Musk took over versus after. Before Elon Musk took over, were we censored? Absolutely. I was heavily suppressed before Elon Musk took over. Of course, X, Twitter, whatever it was called, was suppressing leftist thought, some right wing, stopping organic protests across the United States, etc. Then it's sold off to Elon Musk, and people go, oh, well, that's freedom of speech, right? If you watch Joe Rogan, the only reason we have freedom of speech is because Elon Musk took over Twitter. Well, no, now you just have basically the reverse. You have Elon Musk suppressing speech that is not pro-right wing, that is not pro-Christian nationalism, that is not pro-Trump, etc. And I know he's had his spat with Trump, but that doesn't mean that Trump's followers are not still heavily promoted and pumped up on X. Of course, it's this crazy hypocrisy where the U.S. is acting like other countries are the only ones suppressing or trying to censor these platforms. Last thing on this, the program budget submitted to NED shows $264,000, 18 in direct cost, $18,000 sub grant, $65,000 indirect cost. Large portion covered Washington-based personnel, program managers, technical specialists, support staff, and repeated international flights between DC and Kathmandu. Domestic travel funds covered workshops in Eastern and Western Nepal, field office salaries, rent, utilities, equipment were all included. Invoices had to be submitted by September 30th each year within 90 days of project end, underscoring the tight financial oversight. Let me ask you this. If you're at all skeptical of what I'm saying here, if the U.S. is spending $350,000, U.S. government, sending officials to Nepal to train young people, why would they do that? Do you think they do it just because they want to see democracy and they want to see young people get involved with making change? Does that sound like our government? Does that sound like what our government does in the United States? No, of course not. If we're going to put hundreds of thousands of dollars and fly officials and trainers and people across the world to fucking Nepal, then there better be a good reason. And it is to try, and often successfully, coup countries around China, allied with China, might have some way they're helping China grow. That is why you're seeing these organic youth movements. It doesn't mean there's no corruption in Nepal before this. It doesn't mean there aren't young people that feel genuinely about creating change in Nepal. It just is what it is. The U.S. was a powerful influence and the Western digital manipulation in this coup and in possible other coups going on in Asia. I mean, right now they're protests. I don't think another government has fallen. There you go. You cannot get that from U.S. media at all.